Amidst China's aggressive campaign to revitalize the nation with technology, Chinese investors stand to lose a lot if they don't learn to bypass China's firewall and read overseas websites. Here is the experience shared by a 21-year-old Chinese woman. She wrote, "I lit a handful of incense and knelt at the Yonghe Palace Temple. I begged the divine to give me back the principal in my semiconductor mutual fund." Here is the story she told. In November 2021, I bought 520,000 yuan or US 72,000 in a semiconductor mutual fund. I held on to a notion of a tech boom at the time, and the day after I bought it, it went up 4 points. I felt okay, like I was a young Warren Buffett, but after that, it kept going down. At the end of the year, a bank approached me and told me that it wanted to boost its performance and would give me a 4% interest rate and a gift if I deposited 1 million yuan, i.e. US 140,000, in a large certificate of deposit. I accepted. At that time, I thought if I didn't take the money out, I wasn't really losing money, and money was just a number. As a result, I lost the first 100,000 yuan within a few days. I started to increase my stakes, adding to it whenever I had money. Although each time I added money, it was about 50,000 or 100,000 yuan at a time. And in real life, I started to have to weigh the cost of a taxi ride. What I remember deeply is that in March 2022, during the Russian-Ukrainian war, the fund fell to its lowest point in several years, and I didn't dare to put any more money into replenishing my fund. By September 21, 2022, I had lost 293,000 yuan or 40,000 USD. I had held a total of US 112,000 in a semiconductor fund. I couldn't take it anymore psychologically. At that moment, I started to doubt myself. What the hell am I doing? A loss of US 40,000 wasn't a small sum of money, and I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. At that time, I was also under quarantine because of the epidemic. I felt like I should just drop dead. But I was still blindly buying and adding to my fund, thinking I could amortize the loss. In December 2022, I went to the Yonghe Palace Temple and I made a wish in front of the Buddha. Can you please allow the principal of the semiconductor fund to be recovered in 2023? I have a particularly strong recollection that at that time, normal people lit 3 pieces of incense at the Yonghe Palace Temple. I lit a handful of incense and knelt at the Yonghe Palace Temple, begging the Buddha to let me recoup the capital of my semiconductor fund. Buying funds makes me more sensitive to the world. When I see the situation in Russia and Ukraine, the depreciation of the renminbi, I will think about whether my fund will be affected by something again. I feel like I am living in a kind of turbulence every day. Although I don't understand why, when I see huge changes in my fund, I still want to find out what's happening in the world. Many Chinese haven't realized that the chip war between China and the US has only just begun. The Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP's road to technological power, has yet to see the light of day. First, let's look at the latest information. U.S. national security analysts have warned that Chinese AI companies may be able to bypass current export control regulations through cloud services and gain access to the computing performance of advanced AI chips such as NVIDIA's A100 and H100. The Biden administration intends to close this loophole. On July 5, 2023, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Biden administration plans to restrict Chinese companies from using U.S. cloud computing services. Once this measure is implemented, U.S. cloud service providers, including Amazon and Microsoft, must obtain permission from the U.S. government before providing Chinese customers with cloud computing services that use advanced process AI chips. According to the report, the Biden administration's planned restrictions are thought to close a major loophole in China's development of artificial intelligence. Previously, in August 2022, the U.S. government restricted exports to China of a range of GPUs made by NVIDIA and AMD for supercomputing and AI technologies, specifically the NVIDIA A100 and H100 and AMD MI250 chips. But NVIDIA quickly launched the A800 chip, which was customized for the Chinese market to circumvent U.S. export restrictions. Now, in the coming weeks, the U.S. will revise its export controls and publish a final version of the regulations. It'll include expanded restrictions on AI chips produced by NVIDIA and other chip makers. NVIDIA's A800 chip, which was specially designed for the Chinese market, is on the list of restrictions, as well as licensing restrictions on use in the cloud services. The news has impacted shares of companies such as NVIDIA and AMD. Chinese AI stocks suffered even more losses. In response to the Biden administration, on July 3, 2023, China's Ministry of Commerce and General Administration of Customs issued a joint announcement deciding to impose export controls on gallium and germanium-related items, which are key materials for making semiconductors, effective August 1st.
What I want to say is that China has always been committed to maintaining the security and stability of the global production and supply chain and has always implemented fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory export control measures. It's an international common practice for the Chinese government to implement export control on relevant items in accordance with the law, and it does not target any specific countries.
The reserves, output, and exports of gallium and germanium in China occupy a leading position globally. According to the data, the largest importers of Chinese gallium products in 2022 were Japan, Germany, and the Netherlands. The main importers of germanium products were Japan, France, Germany, and the U.S. Once the CCP imposes export controls, it won't be easy for these countries to find alternatives. A former Vice Minister of Commerce was quoted in the Chinese media as saying that this is just the beginning of China's countermeasures and that it will not only make certain countries panic but will also make certain countries hurt. TSMC, the world's largest semiconductor maker, doesn't expect any direct impact on its production. Intel is evaluating the situation, saying that our strategy is to have a diversified global supply chain, which minimizes our exposure to local changes and disruptions. Eurasia Group, a leading international consulting firm, said in a report that the control of gallium and germanium exports is a warning, not a fatal blow. On July 5th, a spokesman for the U.S. Department of Commerce responded that the U.S. firmly opposes China's announcement to impose export controls on gallium and germanium, which are metals used in the production of chips and other electronic products. These actions underscore the need to diversify supply chains. The U.S. will engage with our allies and partners to address this and to build resilience in the critical supply chains. In June 2022, the U.S. signed a multinational agreement with Japan, Canada, and other countries called the Mineral Security Partnership, or MSP, which aims to secure the supply of key minerals such as nickel, lithium, and cobalt. On March 10, 2023, the U.S. and the European Union announced an agreement whereby the U.S. would provide preferential treatment for key minerals from Europe in order to prevent the two sides from engaging in unhealthy competition, and more importantly, to reduce their dependence on China. On March 28, the U.S. and Japan announced an agreement to strengthen the supply chain for minerals critical to electric vehicle batteries. The U.S. said the agreement could be historic by ensuring that the U.S. and its allies are not dependent on other countries for key minerals. This time, the CCP used the more ambiguous language of control rather than ban. So whether the CCP is bluffing or being serious, it's likely to have backfired and helped the U.S. reorganize the global supply chain for key minerals. The emergence of the chip has changed the way humans wage war and has even become one of the core elements in determining the situation on the battlefield and whether a war is won or lost. Look at the Russian-Ukrainian war. In the information or intelligence war between the two sides, the Russian military failed miserably. Why? Because it's now an era of information technology and network warfare. The electronic equipment in the modern weapons systems use mostly high-end chips, which are the brains of all weapons. Although the weapons given to Ukraine by NATO aren't the most advanced ones, they are much more advanced than those of the Russian military. A clear generational gap exists between the weapons used by the two sides. Currently, big data can be used to analyze a person's behavior and psychological state. It has a great impact on the control of society and on an entire human being. Big data relies on chips for storage and computing, so when the Biden government came to power, it treated the chip as the most important strategic asset for national security and cracked down on China's chip industry. In October 2022, the Biden administration introduced a set of export restrictions on China. It includes any manufacturer of semiconductor equipment in the U.S. and any manufacturer that uses U.S. equipment and U.S. technology. In other words, this kind of equipment can't be exported to China if U.S. technology is used. For example, a photolithography machine like the one produced by Dutch manufacturer ASML. It's an essential piece of equipment in semiconductor production. The software it uses is from a US-based company. In such a case, ASML can't sell its machine to China, even if the hardware is produced by ASML itself. The sudden issuance of this ban has led to the overnight withdrawal of many people who have the status of American citizens or green cards and are engaged in technical support in China. Since then, the White House shows no intention of slowing down in this chip war. On June 25, 2023, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken was interviewed by CBS. He said, "The main purpose of the trip to China was to bring some greater stability to the relationship between the U.S. and China. But one of the things that I said to my Chinese counterparts during this trip was that we're going to continue to do things and say things that you don't like, just as you're no doubt going to continue to do and say things that we don't like." Worst of all for the CCP is that the US has numerous allies who are also taking action. On June 30th, the Dutch government unveiled its latest export controls on chip manufacturing equipment. The new regulations restrict the export of DUV deep ultraviolet lithography equipment to China. It'll come into effect in September. That is, the Dutch government has imposed licensing requirements on ASML's second largest product line series, DUV. ASML's high-end machines' extreme ultraviolet lithography EUV are already restricted from shipping to China. In addition to the Netherlands, Japan has adopted new rules restricting the export of 23 types of semiconductor manufacturing equipment, which will go into effect on July 23rd. Note that this time the Dutch restriction is on ASML's immersed DUV and not on EUV, which has been banned for a while. EUV lithography can produce chips below 7 nanometers such as 5 nanometers, 3 nanometers, and 2 nanometer chips. The immersion DUV lithography has three main models: TwinScan NXT 2050i, 2000i, and 1980di. 2050i and 2000i were banned from exporting to China in March 2023. This time, even the 1980di won't be sold to China. The 1980di, 2000i, and 2050i all support 38 nanometer processes or less. 1980di is generally used for mass production of 16 nanometer, 14 nanometer, and 10 nanometer processes, but it's generally used for chips of 14 nanometers and above, and seldom used for chips below 14 nanometers. 2000i is mainly for 7 nanometer processes and DRAM production, and the latest 2050i is mainly for 7 nanometer and 5 nanometer processes. While China has not yet achieved a leading position in high-end chip manufacturing, it has had considerable production capacity and success in the lower-end chips, i.e. the mature process area. The Dutch government's new ban expands the scope of the crackdown on Chinese chip making. This has angered the CCP.
China has always opposed the U.S. side's generalization of the concept of national security, abuse of export controls, using various excuses to lure or coerce other countries to engage in a science and technology blockade against China, and applying administrative intervention in normal economic and trade exchanges between enterprises, which seriously undermines market rules and the international economic and trade order and impacts the stability of the global production and supply chain, and is not in the interest of any party. China will pay close attention to the relevant movements and resolutely safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
For the US and its allies, deep ultraviolet lithography is dual-use technology, meaning it can be used for both commercial and military purposes. The US government is preventing the CCP from developing military and surveillance technologies that threaten the security of Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific region. One very important way the CCP is modernizing its military is by promoting what it calls civil-military integration. This is a national-level strategy of the CCP regime. It has corresponding supporting organizations and facilities designed to use civilian resources, technology, and capital, or to use civilian identities to steal foreign technology to achieve the CCP's goal of strengthening its military. Now, the U.S. has become very, very careful in this regard. For this aspect of civil-military integration, if anything may be used for the military, the U.S. will now impose restrictions on such technology. The U.S. has been studying what kinds of weapons the Chinese military has, the equipment it might use, as well as the kind of technology it uses. It has conducted specific studies and imposed restrictions accordingly. The European Union relies on U.S. intelligence in this respect. The member states of the European Union should be getting increasingly worried about whether their technologies will be used to modernize the Chinese army. The latest Dutch ban goes some way to remove such risks.
Aber Sicherheit ist eine große Herausforderung.
Security is a big challenge, and of course that means a challenge for the entire budget because all of these tasks came on top. If the situation were different, a lot could be handled more easily, but it's necessary that we take on this task and that we do what's necessary for the security of our country, the equipment for the army, and the strength of the alliance, NATO. And that's what we are doing.
Der NATO tun, und das tun wir.
As we have described in previous episodes, the chip battle between China and the US has now expanded to Europe and Japan. In January 2023, the Netherlands, Japan, and the US entered into a three-way agreement imposing export controls on cutting-edge semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China. In March 2023, Japan announced an export control on 23 types of semiconductor manufacturing equipment and chemicals, preventing them from being exported to China. Now that the Netherlands, the US, and Japan are tied together as an alliance, South Korea is expected to get on board soon, and naturally, so will Taiwan. This will deal a heavy blow to the CCP's chip manufacturing industry. When countries target the CCP with increasingly stringent technology controls, it would virtually send China's technology to a standstill. Why? The research and development of the most advanced technology in the US is not only in the military. Some American universities such as Harvard, Yale, and Princeton are also engaged in cutting-edge frontier scientific research, the basic scientific research. Then the basic scientific research is applied to commercial production. On the basis of such research and development, the U.S. government or military can apply it to the development of weapons or conduct further research. The U.S. and its allied governments don't oppress people's independent thinking and personal development. Chinese people are equally intelligent and industrious, but if they lived in Red China, they wouldn't have the social environment and corresponding physical conditions to think independently. Basic scientific research usually takes several years or even decades to produce results. It's a very long process. The rapid development of many of the CCP's previous technologies relied on cheating. For example, plagiarism or stealing intellectual property from Europe and the US. Sometimes it targets high-tech companies and institutions in Europe and the US through corporate acquisitions, academic collaborations, illicit digital espionage, insiders, secret investments, and illegal exports. China's entire society at large is encouraging people from all walks of life to make a quick buck. In China's various universities and research institutes, it's bureaucracy running the schools or bureaucrats managing the research institutes. That is to say, laymen are leading and managing professionals. Bureaucrats are too busy to earn interest for themselves, too busy sucking up to their superiors, and too busy to devote themselves to research. Once those bureaucrats can no longer copy others' work or buy advanced equipment, China's science and technology risks collapsing. As the technology and export control by the US government becomes more stringent, we see that China's technology will degrade very quickly. On June 29, 2023, news came out that the C919 airliner of Shanghai Orient Airlines flight MU9197 didn't return as usual after flying to Chengdu, and the return flight MU918 was carried out by an Airbus A320. What does this mean? It shows that the C919, a domestically produced large passenger plane, had an accident after flying to its destination. It experienced technical failures and had to stop flying suddenly. The development of the C919 took 14 years. The first aircraft was delivered on December 9, 2022, and its maiden flight began on May 28, 2023, carrying passengers daily from Shanghai Hongqiao Airport to Chengdu Tianfu Airport. It operated for 1 month by June 28, 2023. The main parts of the C919 come from abroad, and any one of them would cause problems if they weren't properly integrated. The assembly technology and technical parameters of the airplane are critical, and any mistake can cause a disaster in flight. The CCP spent 14 years of research to conduct work on system integration, that is, to assemble all kinds of different parts. But such integration makes it difficult to know at which point something has gone wrong. From the case of the C919, we can see that if China wants to make a sudden change of track and start real independent research and development, it's likely to encounter unprecedented difficulties.